To the left is Jim Watt, Princeton-trained architect, restaurant designer, and artist, as well as an integral part of rebuilding Asbury Park and co-founder of the Smith Group. Welcome. Let the dialogue begin.
It's funny because I knew Jim as an architect, but I didn't know him as a painter until, about 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
And one day he showed up, and he, as you know, we have a print studio, and we photograph art for printing and for, archiving and things like that. And so he comes in with all these paintings, he just puts them down and we make plans to shoot it. And I said, I had no idea he was doing any of this work. And we loved his work, and there's a couple of things I have to say about it. His work is not easy to define. You know how sometimes you look, oh, that's contemporary, that's modern, that's expressionist, that's this or that. How do you start going about your work with the ideas with that in mind?
Well, it's a great question because I don't think about it. You know what I mean? I think in retrospect, you would think about like influences, right? I mean, that's the obvious thing. You would think about influences. So I started studying architecture when I was 18 at Temple University. So I had this wonderful professor, his name is Norm Franke, and my first semester studio is like where you spend all your time, and it's like where you put all of your energy throughout all 5 years of architecture school, and then in graduate school, it's the same thing. It's about studio. Everything else is secondary. So my studio for the first semester was held at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And what Norman said to us, was, I'm going to teach you how to see. And I was like, see, okay. And once we got into it, he was using the museum, the architecture of the museum, but all of its contents, its grounds, its landscaping, everything, as the vehicle through which we would learn to see as an artist. And he said that as an artist, not necessarily as an architect. And that was just an incredible gift. I just that was such a game changer for me. And so for that semester, and ever since then, I've been a member of that museum and others, but it set me on a course for really kind of falling in love with art and architecture, not as necessarily two completely different things, but part of this, part of a set of kind of like, back to the Renaissance idea that, the artists, visual artists express themselves through a variety of mediums, right? Sculpture, painting, architecture. And that's sort of how Norman was setting things up for us. It's like, this is all a language. It's a visual language. There's ideas here. They're being expressed. They speak to different times. When this building was built, what was happening in this country, what was happening in the world, what was happening in art, how did that show up here? You go into the modern wing of there, Anselm Kiefer is a post-war German neo-expressionist who's somebody that I fell in love with Anselm Kiefer and his work, his paintings, before I really fell in love with architecture, because I hadn't been exposed to that much, but I was looking at these paintings and I was just completely changed by them. I was changed by the whole experience of kind of just getting a glimpse when I was 18 years old at that first semester of what it means to be an artist. This is the longest answer to a very simple question, but to come around to what the answer is that I think that all of those influences that started back then, where I was kind of understanding what I was connected to, what had meaning to me then, what I was moved by. I think all of those things inform what I've done, and a lot of it is neo-expressionism, some of it is impressionism, a lot of it is sort of the manipulation of the surface and the materiality of a lot of that work that I saw. A lot of it is architectural. A lot of it has to do with, spatial constructions, and hopefully the work kind of explores that in a way that's not, hopefully not all that easily digestible, because the point is it's sort of it's both very abstract and very representational, and kind of it's neither and both at the same time.
So as a painter and an architect, where you're dealing with actual space,
Yeah.
you're, on one hand, you're painting very organic, but in architecture, it's very linear, not totally,
Yeah.
but you have to work with a lot of lines and straight lines and things like that. How do you feel that you're able to jump back and forth?
The most fascinating thing to me about architecture and being an architect is scale. Right? So the tools of the architect are to-scale drawings and to-scale models. What you learn to do is represent things that are very big, sometimes very small, and then as you develop them, they get a little bigger, right? So scale, it's like cranking up a microscope. Every time you want to develop something a little further, you crank the microscope up. But you're always representing something else. And then those things themselves become quite beautiful, right? So architectural drawings, like, I don't know, everybody in this room, I would imagine you've seen beautiful architectural drawings. And you're like, that is amazing. Well, what that is that's a drawing that represents something else, right? And it first becomes a design tool, and then it becomes a technical tool by which you communicate certain things to builders, to clients, to municipalities, all of those things. But you're always working in this idea of representation. So it's representation. The building is not representational, and some philosophers will argue about that, but it's that those forms of representation that I was always fascinated with. I love the idea that this thing, this model that I'm building, or this drawing that I'm working on, or this sketch that I'm doing, is referring to something else, is representing something else that's at a completely different scale, in a completely different space. And at the same time, it's a thing in and of itself. It's this artifact in and of itself. To me, painting is the same thing. Drawing is the same. Painting and drawing in a fine art capacity is the same thing. You are, in these pieces, I am representing other things, right? And at the same time, I'm creating an artifact in and of itself that can be evaluated on its own terms, as this thing here, right here in front of us. But it also speaks to something else. It's telling you, it's representing, it's illustrating something else. The formality of it doesn't matter to me. It just doesn't matter at all. Whether the lines are straight or wiggly or crooked or whatever. I think that, in 1987, I went to Whitney and saw a retrospective of Frank Gehry's work. So now everybody knows Frank Gehry, right? Frank Gehry designed the arena in Brooklyn. I mean, he's a household name stepper. In 1987, for this, again, I was 18 years old, to see these models and these drawings that were works of art themselves. And they were beautiful pieces of sculpture. And he argued to this day, as a man of 90 years old, that he is an architect and not a sculptor. But I would defy him. If he was sitting here on the couch next to me, I would argue him, I think, into submission, that he is more fascinated with his drawings and his models than he is with his buildings. That's what I'm doing. Like, I'm creating artifacts that also refer to something else, right? And if I'm expressing the ideas that I'm interested in, you are somehow caught between it being both of those things and neither of those things.
Chairs occupy a lot of Jim's paintings, and you explained it to me really interesting. You gave me really interesting explaining. Can you tell us about chairs?
Okay. Probably not, but I'm going to go for it anyway. So, chairs to me are fascinating objects, but they also create space. They also have utility, right? So they have this kind of sculptural quality that in and of itself is interesting. But they define space in a way that I think is really interesting. they have to stand up and support people. They can or can't be comfortable. There's an intimacy between people and chairs. I had somebody who I really trust tell me that the chairs are my self-portraits. Now, he wouldn't tell me why, so I'm not even going to try to guess as to why, but he was very clear that that was me. The chair is you. So whether that's true or not, I have no idea. It is interesting that the chair is, the vast majority of the chairs don't have people in them in my work. There's somebody else who I trust who talked about, there was a certain silence about the chair with no person in it. It was, spoke to, I don't think loneliness is the wrong thing, but there's a certain silence to it. So the short answer is I have no friggin' idea what the significance of the chairs are. But they keep showing up. Like just subconsciously, I keep painting and drawing chairs. And I've become kind of interested in the fact that that is a thread that runs through almost all of the work. And a lot of the chairs are very, very abstracted. A lot of them are, much more obvious.
Does anybody have any questions of
Feel free
anything?
to.
Jim, how do you start your paintings? Do you do a sketch? Do you work with photographs?
Sometimes I'll have some loose idea about kind of a landscape or kind of the beginnings of a really abstracted still life or something like that. Very, very rarely does it end up being that. Every once in a while it does. Every once in a while, painting will just happen quickly and I'll stop working on it and that'll be the case. But basically, the first thing to do is just put something down on the canvas and just start working with it in a very kind of improvisational way.
So you're intuitive.
Yes, intuitive, improvisational. It sort of starts to speak to you. You put something down and then you react to that.
How much influence do you think the architecture has had on what you do?
A massive amount. I don't think there's any other way to kind of think about it. You start to think about space in just a different way. You conceptualize space. Like space to me is a language. It's just something I feel very, very comfortable with. I'm very comfortable manipulating it, whether it be in a drawing or a building itself. And I think that understanding of space and getting really good at space is the thing that I hope shows up most in the work.
In a lot of paintings, contemporary paintings, I don't see the color pink. And I see a lot of pink. And it's a bold choice because it's unbold, So can you talk about your palette?
I'm always interested in music that sometimes melodically is at odds with the lyrical content of it. Right? So you have sort of incredibly soft and beautiful melody. And lyrically, there's something much heavier happening there. And I was thinking, and that exists, I think, in a lot of jazz and classical music too. There are different elements that are sort of seducing you in one way, and then something else, unbeknownst to that, is sort of happening. And to me, that is the role that, for me, color plays in my work. That it can sometimes, it can add another layer to the work conceptually that is completely at odds with some of the other layers. But it's the juxtaposition between maybe the different kind of structure or to use the word we've been talking here a lot about architecture, the architecture of the painting can be one thing. And then the color palette can be saying something very different. And it's those two things layered together. And I think that colors, like for example, like, just from a technical point of view, the way I like to manipulate color is a color red or a color green and white. And then kind of bring those, explore that throughout a painting by just introducing varying degrees of white into that color. And depending on how much white, it changes the paint completely. And then the paint says something, different each time. It's different. And the emotional content of the color, I think, is really interesting too.
As an oil painter, you have a different challenge of getting from one color to another. How do you think about that? What's your...
The reason I really love to paint oils is because it's so challenging. Oil paint doesn't dry. I mean, it takes weeks and weeks for oil paint to dry, which basically means it's a mixable medium the whole time. So you drag a brush of some other color through that color, and something's going to happen. And it is a bit of a high wire act painting in oil, and that's what is so kind of engaging as an artist and really exciting. The pigment, the depth of the pigment in oil allows you to explore so many different variations of that color by just adding a little or a lot to it. The other thing I like about oil is that it has a material quality that I like to build it up and scrape it away and create texture and really explore that is a medium that's sliding around on a surface that has a third dimension to it. It's infinite. It's infinite what you can do, and it's also incredibly unforgiving. It turns to mud. A painting will turn to a disastrous assemblage of mud in 2 seconds, and you're like, what just happened? This was wonderful.
I get they undo.
Yeah. No, there's no undo. There's no undo, and I think that's the high wire act. It's like you can go for something and be so excited about it, which is always a dangerous thing as an artist, but being so excited about it, and then all of a sudden one move and you're like, I just ruined this. And you have 2 options. One is you wait 3 weeks for it to dry, or the other is scrape it all off.
I know we talk a lot about being inspired by architecture and other artists that you've grown up seeing. What else inspires you?
What else inspires you? The act of making, to me, is the biggest inspiration for me. I have a compulsion since I was a little kid to make things. I don't know what it is. My being operates through the making of things. And to me, the making of paintings or drawings or, is something that I'm just compelled to do. What inspires me most is the act of making is something that is, I think, just who I am. I make them.
I want to thank you all for coming.